You're listening to the Discussing the Resilient podcast, hosted by Aiden Smalley and William Reid, a competitive 40k podcast for the servants of Nurgle and the fallen 14th Legion. Tactics, meta-analysis, and all things Death Guard.
Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of the Discussing the Resilient podcast. This week we've got a very special episode. We've welcomed a guest. People in Death Guard community probably have an inkling of who this is if they haven't already read the notes of the podcast. Obviously me and Aiden are here as usual, but we're also joined by the man of the moment, Ennis, who took Death Guard to a GT and did rather well. For those people who don't know about Ennis, we'll let him introduce himself in a second, but he's a WTC player, captain of Team Scotland. He's also one of the people in the UK who, if he turns up an event, he normally wins it. You know, it's either him, Manny, one of those guys, Mike Porter. You know, they're the people to sort of beat, and Ennis is in there as well. So obviously, we'll caveat before Ennis gets a chance to his list. He ran Death Guard as a bit of a sort of skill test and to show, you know, that the army isn't completely useless and there are things that maybe people overlooked. But he's not necessarily running the army as something that, you know, he thinks is going to like take down super mages against other top players. But obviously we'll let Ennis sort of run through the list and do a bit of an intro. But before we let Ennis jump in, is there anything you want to say or?
No, I'm just happy to let Ennis basically take the reins there and go for it.
There you go. Well, Ennis, there you go. Introduce yourself, man of the moment.
Yeah, much appreciated, guys. Thank you so much for having me. As Will mentioned, I'm Ennis Wilson. I'm the captain of Team Scotland for WTC. I've been playing competitive 40k since I was about 18 years old, so going on for almost a decade now. And I've been playing Death Guard for a little bit recently. I took them to a tournament because I felt like giving myself a bit of a challenge. I have the unfortunates of Team Scotland. We're a fairly small country. We all live pretty close to each other. That means when I go to tournaments in Scotland, most of Team Scotland's there. And, well, that means our Eldar player was there, and I am not better than him at any army as he is at an Eldar right now, so I decided to try and go for an alternative win condition for the tournament, which basically meant trying to do something that, you know, would challenge my skills, but wouldn't necessarily require me to win the tournament to be happy, which is kind of where I end up now with GTs. If I'm not like top 3, I'm probably going to be disappointed in myself, but right now that doesn't really feel feasible because most people in Eldar will beat me on most armies I play. So, leaned away from that a little bit, went for something a little bit more interesting, and that was Death Guard. I've had a Death Guard army for years. I bought them over COVID as a lockdown project because it felt thematic, and I've taken them to a few events since then. I've played them in, like, you know, little RTTs. I played a Bellicor and Plague Rush Crawlers list at, like, during the Drakari meta, which was the only thing I could fit. I managed to, like, get a decent win rate into Drakari with. So I've definitely, like, I'm not new to Death Guard. It's an army that I've played before, and if it was, you know, somewhere within the top realm of the meta, not one I'd be opposed to playing. But yeah, definitely not an army that I would be looking at taking to like LGT in a month from now if I was going with the intent of trying to win, which I'm hoping I will be.
Oh, nice. I mean, like I said, I had no idea that you've been collecting Death Guard for that long. I guess sort of naively I thought, oh, maybe you sort of like wrote the list and then, you know, messaged a few sort of friends and sort of things like that and just collected the models that you need together. So that's really cool.
I had to borrow a Land Raider and everything else I had.
Yep. Nice, okay. So I'll tell you what, I mean, obviously you mentioned as a Land Raider in the list, that's probably a really good teeing up for running through the list. You know, tell us what was in it, and then obviously, you know, me and Aiden will have some questions and you can sort of explain the tactics and things as to where the synergies are and things like that. Yeah,
for sure. So the core of the list is that there's this little section on the app that says characters, and it's 1,085 points. So we've got 3 Death Guard Chaos Lords of Terminator armor with Combi Weapon and Plague Fist. One of them has Living Plague, 3 Foul Blightspawn, 1 Lord of Virulence, Mortarion, who's the Warlord, and Typhus, who is in his pants. We have a Death Guard Land Raider with stuff. I don't know which ones of these weapons are optional. Las Cannons are cool. 3 Plague Rush Crawlers with Entropy Cannons, 10 Poxwalkers, and then 2 allied units of Nurglings. And that is the entire list.
So a very meta list, as you can tell. Very, very standard build.
Yeah, the problem with writing a Death Guard list is that there weren't any like well-performing Death Guard lists I could really look at. I mean, there was yours, Aiden, from like a month and a half ago now. But that was a month and a half ago. The meta for Death Guard might have changed by now. How was I to know? So there was nothing. I didn't do any research on this. I just kind of went through the data sheets, picked the things that looked stand out, tried to build it to some form of list design theory, and it worked out all right. I can't complain too hard.
So just for the fun of it, I'm just going to quickly ask, how many assassination points do you give up?
It is 36 and 18 bring attacks.
That's quite funny.
Unsurprisingly, everyone who took Assassinate maxed it. But there's this kind of weird thing, like, once you start putting characters in the list, once you go past, like, 6 characters, they're taking Assassinate anyway, so the extra 3 never mattered.
Yeah, you do hit that point.
Giving away Assassination is a, sort of like a spamming thing that you gave out, giving up points. I actually thought it was quite clever because armies like Knights and a lot of other armies, a lot of Death Guard builds give away Bring It Down. And in the way 10th edition works, you know, as long as you're not giving out 2 things kind of easily, giving out Assassinate, you know, instead of Bring It Down, it's not really that big a deal.
I do also give up 18 Bring It Down, so I maybe didn't manage that one quite as well.
That being said, I'm kind of caveating that because I assume the Plague Burst crawlers for the most part sit in the backfield, and if you want to hide them, you can punish people for taking Bring It Down, I assume, with that list.
Yes, people definitely did a lot worse on Bring It Down when they picked it into me than Assassinate, which we can definitely get into and talk about how the list plays. The actual trick is, if people are taking fixed against you, they're losing CP, so...
Yeah, true. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, very good point.
It's not real advice, please don't follow that. But
when me and Will saw this list, because obviously we saw you posted it, and we heard rumblings that you were taking it, me and Will genuinely thought you had some weird bet with your Patreon where they built a list for you, and you were that bored and that sick of current 10th edition, because let's be honest, it's not in the greatest state. I listened to your podcast, so obviously I know you've been a bit, well, more than a bit down about the current state of 40k, and can't really blame you on that front. So I thought this was just kind of like a, hey guys, I can't be arsed at the moment, data slate's coming, you guys write me some list and I'll take it. But it's quite cool to see this is actually something you sat down and was like, I'm going to take this.
I have done the other one before. I took Magnus, Mortarion, Abaddon, and 2 like Contemptors to an RTT last edition because the patron. I was like, I got the patron to give me a list, and I actually ended up winning that RTT, screening for the Plague Burst Crawlers, screening for the Contemptors with the Primarchs because they didn't do anything. There was just two Contemptors and Abaddon walking around tabling people, and like Mortarion sitting in the middle doing the action for the middle of the board. Yeah, Psychic Ritual and yeah, whatever the other one was called, Warp Ritual. Yeah, that was by far the better way to use them at the time. So, but no, this one was actually, I decided to take Death Guard, and then I decided to write the best Death Guard list that I could come up with, without really looking at what else was doing well in the Death Guard space, to try and have a bit of a fresh take on it. That was kind of the policy going in. I do have to ask, what was the general reception, like, what did you guys think of the list when you first saw it?
Well, I suppose I'll start. When I first saw it, I thought the Chaos Lords, you may be meant to put Chaos, the Lord of Contagion, because they're the same points, and I wondered, like, did you look at the data sheet and put the wrong thing in Battlescribe or something? But then we looked deeper into it and about how the sort of the splash of Contagion works, the 4-up doing D3 mortal wounds, and then more extending the Contagion aura. So I figured that was maybe a combo, but like I say, the thing I noticed, or I thought was very smart, was the good thing about our index that maybe has been overlooked is we do have a lot of very efficient pointed characters. Unfortunately, most of them are attached into Plague Marines, which is the sad part of the index, but I'd never thought to take a foul Blightspawn just on his own, because at 55 points with that Flamer, it's actually not bad. And I'm guessing you go for sort of like activation burn on your opponent's sort of units, and you hope that they just don't have enough guns to kill everything. But I assume everything just starts in the Land Raider and it's a bit of a party bus. But again, you know, this is something that I guess you can talk us about. I mean, Aiden as well, I suppose. What were your initial thoughts? Because obviously you're a bit more in tune to these things than I am.
So when I first saw it, I was thinking, like, obviously with the amount of characters you've got, like as Will said, there is activation burn. I also thought it was like trying to play his mission as much as possible. Obviously with lots of like 55 point characters like Foul Blightspawns, you can chuck one of them out of a Land Raider, he can go score a secondary, he dies, you don't really care that much. It was 55 points. They can strat reserve because they're really hard to screen out. It's like a single 40mm base. It's not like trying to screen out an entire unit. Plague Burst Crawls and Mortarion is kind of a no-brainer in my opinion. I've been like shouting down that one for ages for how good it is. I'm not sure if you played them the same way as me. I think I saw a picture of you. I don't know if there's a picture of your game up or something, but I think I saw you being quite aggressive Mortarion at some points. I'm very quite passive in mine, but again, you'll get into that more because I'm sure you probably know more since you were actually there and playing it than I do. But yeah, I think from first looks, half of it was like, okay, I can see how this can like play mission really well. Okay, there's some, you know, decent characters here because, like Will said, I think our characters are decent. I had one concern though, Ennis. One thing you've scared me with, and it's the Chaos Lord aura. You know, the splashing mortal wounds. I'm hoping you're going to say, me, you didn't stack them, did you, buddy?
No, it doesn't stack. I did initially really think it did and tried running 6, and I went to the WTC. I actually went to the WTC World Team Championships rules questions and asked about it through the guys of the Mutilated Vortex piece, which has a similar rule, and tried to get them to rule that it was a pulse effect, so it would aura stack, and they went with no. So I ended up cutting 3 of them for the list for the Blightspawn. I was originally playing the full 6.
Just throw this in the bin, saying, "Oh, he's clearly stacking the auras," and I'm like, no, he's not the kind of player that I'd like make that mistake. Like you said, I'd expect you to at least double check it, like you did, and you did do that. Because it threw me off at first as well. When I first saw the Chaos Lords, I was like, boy, I'm getting 3 of them up in my opponent's face, and I'm just gonna splash mortals everywhere. And then I was like,
that'd be really good. I definitely would run 6 if that was a thing that worked. But no, I went with 3 because I like the data generically. But we can get into it. We can talk about through the choices then. So the basic premise of the list, I think you did a pretty good job of nailing on the head. Is it's trying to play that sort of activation lock style of game where your opponent can't physically split fire weapons in any efficient way into this kind of army, because at some points in the game there are just 7 units in front of you, all of which are single model with an invulnerable save that you kind of have to commit real guns to, and you maybe don't have real guns because I've had a turn of interaction at you, I've shot you with the Land Raider and the Playburst Crawlers, or the indirect, or whatever, right? Or Mortarions charge something, all these kind of things that just say, I'm going to try and remove the things that are efficient at killing one of these in one go, and now you have to make a decision about how you want to split fire. Do you want to fire 1 Fire Prism at 1 Chaos Lord? Probably not. Is that what it's going to take to kill him? Entirely possibly. And there's always a chance that you spike those 2 4 vulnerable saves and you just wasted a full shot that could have done the same damage to any unit in your army. So that was kind of the basic premise. And then having tons of characters means you've got lots of ability to do, actions to jump in the middle. I am a big fan of deploy teleport homers as a fixed secondary, and this army's pretty good at just doing that because it can get nerdlings into the middle pretty early, and then, follow it up. I don't really mind taking a turn off firing a Playburst Crawler. It doesn't do any damage anyway. So that can always sit and do an action, even if it's tagged in combat. And then, Typhus can sit around if he, failed his charge and just gets stuck in the middle. Cool, he can do an action and throw off his ability at long range. And then, the efficiency of Mortarion as a functionally a lieutenant from last edition can't be overstated. Very nice little aura of ignoring modifiers and rural ones, which is what I think I took every single turn of every single game.
Yeah, same. I've never chosen another one.
I almost considered taking the 15-inch Contagion aura from the 1 Chaos Lord once, and I decided that it was too cute and I should just stick to the rural ones. And he just kind of plays, like you said, I played very aggressively with the Playburst Crawlers. I would usually have them just kind of jamming up towards the midboard, trying to get involved, trying to just get things in combat. They don't care about the blast penalty for being in combat if they're next to Mortarion, so they can fire out pretty efficiently. They are terrible at tank shocking because they're for some reason strength 6, but they still can do something. I went down to 1 wound with the tank shock in combat from one of them. I was very upset because I rolled 1-5 on 8 dice.
Ouch.
Yeah, it was very upsetting. I still would have lost that game horribly, but it did hurt. So yeah, that was kind of the basic premise. And then the party boss of the characters, it was usually the Lord of Virulence, the 3 Chaos Lords, and the 3 Foul Blightspawn inside the Land Raider, and then Typhus in Ingress because I only had 1 slot left and he takes 2. Typhus being very, very solid from Ingress because for some reason he's the only Terminator in that book with movement 5, which means he's about 50% more likely to hit his Deep Strike charge than a movement 4 one is, which is a horrifying stat and really just shows you how low these movement values can be. But he was very efficient just coming in from a side, pressuring a flank, causing havoc in my opponent's backfield, sniping at lone operatives, putting damage onto big tanks that I couldn't quite finish off because there's not a ton of volume firepower. And then the party boss would just drive up towards an objective, try and pump out as much lance cannon fire as it could, pop either Cloud of Flies or the generic pop smoke stratagem on 2 vehicles that turn, try and keep them alive, just have a wall of stuff in front of my opponent, and then just don't give them time to deal with that while I'm just racking up points on either tactical or fixed secondaries and trying to play as much denial as I can. And then just giving them problems with the things in their face.
So did you take tactical or fixed secondaries? Which one did you sort of go for? Was it very matchup dependent, and what influenced those decisions?
So I think I played fixed 3 times and tactical twice. Okay. I played tactical game 1 against the Ultramarines because there just wasn't a great fixed secondary option, and they ended up being not amazing. I had pretty bum cards, but again, once you start running out of stuff as a Death Guard army, there is a very solid turn 1 burst of movement with the Land Raider and the Nurglings, where you can get onto places pretty quickly, and it usually doesn't struggle getting cards turn 1 and maybe turn 2. Once you kind of hit that turn 3, 4, 5, you're pretty reliant on it being mid-board or kill secondaries, because anything that's like do an action in deployment zone or get back to your back corner, because I'm not on my home objective, let's be honest. I got stickied on turn 1 and I ran. There's maybe at best a Poxwalker towing it so that you can't deep strike onto it. So it was very much a case of the tactical secondaries were an early game burst to try and get as many points as possible, and then trying to deny my opponent as much as I can. And I ended up drawing that game. The second game I played, it was into a Tau, and this was a very easy game for deploy teleport homers and bring it down, because Tau have more bring it down points than I have assassinate points, which is always nice to see.
Just very quickly, Ennis, sorry. Just for people that are listening, because a lot of people that don't particularly play, how does the scoring work for deploy teleport homers when it's fixed?
Yep, so deploy teleport homers is either 3 victory points for doing an action within 6 of the center of the board, and it's not wholly within 6, just within 6, and then the same, but 4 points for your opponent's deployment zone. So it's just do an action in the middle or in your opponent's deployment zone for 3 and 4 points, and it's very easy to get 15 points on that pretty safely. And then if you can get to your opponent's deployment zone, it's a nice extra, point or 2 here or there, but you don't really feel pressured into playing for that, because 3 for the middle is pretty consistent. It was originally 2, but when they did the Leviathan Tourniquet Companion, they increased it to 3, along with, I believe, behind enemy lines for the 2-point condition on fixed secondaries.
Nice. So Greg, carry on. Sorry, I just wanted to clarify for anyone listening, because fix isn't something we really talked about too much, so it's good to hear.
That's entirely fair. The third game I played into CSM. This was Supply Drop, which is the one with the disappearing objectives, which is never the kind of mission you want to see you're playing into Abaddon
that one's terrible.
And then it was also Hammer and Anvil, so there wasn't a ton of ability to go around my opponent. I was going to have to go through a CSM army, and that's part of why this game ended up being such a blowout. And in this one, I picked Assassinate and deploy teleport homers because I wanted to not have to do anything specific. I just wanted to sit in the middle with a squad of Nurglings, make my opponent come at me, and he did that, and it worked too well. My response turn ended up just not being quite strong enough. So I ended up scoring pretty badly in that game. I think that ended up being an exactly 50-point loss, so a 19-1 in WTC money. That was really rough. And then game 4 and 5 was Eldar twice. The first game into Eldar was it was Vital Ground, which is the one with no middle objective. So I leaned into playing tactical secondaries here, because it was going to be difficult for my opponent to I wasn't going to be able to just sit in the middle for free. There was no reason to be there.
What was in the Eldar lists as well? Because obviously, when we're talking through,
double Wraith Knight, double Fire Prism, 10 Wart Spiders, 5 Shadow Spectres, and a Farseer and a Way Leaper.
So a very, very meta list.
Yeah, I mean, it did have a sword on one of the Wraith Knights, so it was 3 Wraith Cannons, not 4, which is, that's all I got. That was the only thing that was nice in that list.
That's the cute, fun choice.
And the annoying thing is that mattered because it killed a Nurgling squad that was tagging it and stopping it falling back with the sword. So it was very heartbroken. So yeah, that game I played tactical secondaries and I was basically playing that game as a run the score up as quickly as I can, deny my opponent primary, because he was going to have to come to the middle. So I deployed to go first, went first, jammed to the middle. We can probably touch more on that game specifically in a bit, because it's probably the most interesting game I played. And then the last one was the Ritual, which is the one where there's no side objectives, so there's only the objective in the middle, and you can do an action to make new ones. And this mission is, if you've played this mission before, there is a thing that will guarantee you scoring 80 points in this game if you know it, and if you don't know it, it's a very hard mission. The trick for anybody who's not played it before is that if you take Cleanse as a fixed secondary, you resolve the order for making the new objective and the Cleanse action. So you can start Cleanse on turn 1 with a unit that isn't on an objective, and then make the objective with another unit, which then makes the objective at the end of the turn, triggering Cleanse at the end of the turn as well. You choose Cleanse second, you get the 2 points on turn 1. And then Cleanse doesn't check, it's not per unit per objective, so you can then make the second objective 9 inches away, Cleanse with the same unit on both objectives, and get 4 points a turn for 18 guaranteed secondary points on Cleanse without leaving your deployment zone, basically, because you can just make them along the deployment zone line. So I had a Nurgling squad and a Land Raider do that turn 1, and then turn 2, Nurgling squad and the Land Raider, and then the Poxwalkers stood on 2 objectives and cleanse them both for the rest of the game.
And this is Ennis Wilson, everybody. This is why he's captain of Team Scotland. I genuinely didn't know that, dude. That is, I am taking that one to the bank with me.
Yeah, Cleanse is
shit.
a wonderful secondary in exactly that mission. And then I also played Deploy Teleport Homers because, well, I was going to have to stand in the middle anyway, and I wasn't going to try and take, like, bring it down or something. So I basically, this game just played heads down, thumbs up, stuck my head in the sand, slammed the button on make objectives and do actions, and then just played primary denial with the rest of my army to try and keep my opponent's 20 Wraith Guard off of my deployment zone. Which I managed to kill. I think I killed 7 of the Wraith Guard and both the Spirit Seers.
Nice.
Just walked in, epic challenged them so I could charge them with Nurglings to make them hit on 5s to keep them in combat, because only one of them could fall back and shoot. And just restricted his shooting that way.
That's really good.
But yeah, that was the basic premise, is that sometimes you'll play tactical secondaries when you have to, but if you can play fixed, you should play fixed with this style of list, because the entire goal is to just focus on denying your opponent every single point you can. Whether that's by jumping on primary, just shoving, 7 Chaos Lords, the Chaos Lord aura, the Desiccating Conduit, the one which is like the contagion range aura of on a 4+ take D3 mortal wounds, right? You can sit a Chaos Lord with Living Plague like behind a wall in range of 2 objectives against a lot of armies and just say, I'm just going to add up repetitive damage. It's end of turn, not end of your turn. So on average, every unit's going to be taking D3 mortal wounds a phase or per like turn cycle. And it's very possible that you'll hit 2 in a row on a unit and just kill it for no reason.
Oh yeah, because the average is 4 mortal wounds, isn't it? If you are lucky enough to get it off
if you hit twice, it's 4 mortal wounds. That's a lot of lone operatives dead, a lot of little squads in Sisters in Eldar and things like that. Gene Circle units don't love it because they have a ton of things. It can very quickly add up, and it's not an easy model to deal with behind a wall. So I found that guy really great. I then had 2 more with the same ability that was just get in the way and get into people. Usually they would just kind of burst out and try to, they're the ones that would go for the charges. The Living Plague guy would kind of just be the one that would go really aggressively to try and get into my range of my opponent's objective and things like that. But a 12-inch aura is a huge range of distance from turn 3 onwards.
Yeah.
You can even do things like, if you put that guy in reserve, you can ingress him in, be 12 away from a bunch of stuff on turn 3, and then you trigger at the end of your opponent's turn, then the end of your turn with them having basically no opportunity to respond. If you can catch enough stuff with that, it's like a iterative Moloch that's a lot smaller and can just sit into an action that isn't unhappy to. So I was very, very impressed with that datasheet ability. They also just are okay in combat with 5 attacks at 822 lethal hits, and the combi bolter damage adds up. It's just a couple of mortal wounds here and there when you're fighting things like an Altarch Way Leaper or like a Primaris Lieutenant or whatever, that kind of thing. It's nice to just, occasionally just dump 2 mortal wounds on them, plus the mortal wounds, and then charge them and finish them off. They were very impressive, and they were part of the whole, just the scoring strategy, because you don't mind taking a turn off from them shooting. They'll just sit there and use their aura.
That's quite clever. So they weren't like an integral part. It wasn't like the strategy linchpinned on their particular datasheet ability, but it was something that was there and it was part of a toolbox rather than like the actual tactic itself.
Yeah, exactly. I would say the Living Plague one had a specific plan, and that's that sometimes that guy just goes straight forward and just gets in range of a bunch of toughness 10 vehicles to drop their toughness by 1 for the entry cannons. And that's really nice in the right situation, because getting from winning on 401s to 301s is a very significant damage increase output, with getting that Nurgle's Gift aura in range. But yeah, most of the time it's just that there will be something that this guy can do, or he can just sit there and be like a user of your CP reroll when nothing else matters. He can get the stealth strategy, he can sit in cover and just be obnoxious behind a wall that your opponent is going to have to commit real resources to killing, and then when they commit resources to killing it, that mostly means coming into line of sight of Plagueburst Crawlers, of the Land Raider, into charge range of Mortarion. And it's all about setting up your opponent to get punished or making plays they have to make, and that's how you kind of develop an advantage when you're in a disadvantage situation, is by just saying, you have to do something about this or this will keep happening to you, and then, setting up to have things that can go well for you, whichever way they play it.
Yeah, I'm like, that's really cool use of the Chaos Lord there. And to be honest, I've not really looked at it myself, and I might actually start looking at it a bit more now. I like the idea of, like you said, it's not a unit that you can, because he's obviously a Chaos Lord. He's like, it's kind of he's 5 or 6 wounds, but he's like 4 up invuln.
6 wounds, toughness 6, 12 save, 4 up invulnerable save. Yeah.
So if you put that behind a wall, even if you can't just send out something like a squad of intercessors or something like that and pick him up. You have to. You said if they want to pick that up, they have to actually dedicate a unit. So chances are, even if you do lose him, you trade back the kill. Chances are you're going to get the value way higher than they sacrifice for that. So even in that scenario where he does just die, I'm guessing 99% of the time you're going to uptrade that.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of the general thinking with it. Does that always work? No, Death Guard are not the best army in the game right now. There are armies that can deal with him for free. Chaos Space Marines being the best example. Like, Chaos Space Marines don't get activation locked because everything in their army does so much damage that they kind of roll through this. But into things like Eldar, where, you know, they don't actually have a ton of stuff. Once you killed, like, a squad of Shadow Spectres or a squad of Warp Spiders, then you're just leaving them with, you know, they've got a Fire Prism or a Wraith Knight to shoot at you. You know, which one of those do you want to shoot at my one Chaos Lord? I promise you the answer isn't one that you're going to be happy with.
Yeah, so in those matchups, was those units that you said, like, obviously aren't as afraid of activation lock, like the Shadow Spectres, the Warp Spiders, were they sort of your priority target number one for, like, the Plague Burst Crawls, for example?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you can fire a Plague Burst Crawler at a Wraith Knight, and, you know, it's not the worst thing in the world because you ignore the modifier for Fortune, you ignore the damage reduction, you could potentially ignore cover if you can get the Lord of Virulence. You know, if you want to do 4 damage to a Wraith Knight, firing 3 Plague Burst Crawlers is a good way to do it. It's more reliable than, like, the entropy cannons or the las cannons. It's not fun to do. But most of the time it's just, go and shoot a bunch of Shadow Spectres with no modifiers, try and pick up a scoring asset, make it so that if they want to do deploy teleport homers, it has to be a real unit deploying teleport homers, right? That's kind of what you're trying to do. You're trying to make it so that they have the least number of things to do the most amount of stuff with, and make them have to do those things. If you're going to have to deploy teleport homers, I want it to be a Wraith Knight or a Fire Prism doing it. I want it to be the Way Leaper running into charge range so I can kill him next turn and you don't get your CP anymore. I don't want it to be a squad of Shadow Spectres that you don't care about. I want that to be dying as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I think it's really clever as well because it sort of plays into the meta at the moment for these Eldar lists. It's sort of like with the Wraith Knights, you said the D3 shots each, blast, which doesn't come into play when it's going to be shooting at, like you said, single unit characters.
I have 1 squad of Poxwalkers that you can resolve blast against.
Ooh, scary. So, like, having, like, the average, D3 shots, isn't it, per Wraith Cannon? So you try and put 1 at each guy, you're going to have, you know, average 2 shots at, say you're shooting 2 Chaos Lords with it, you're going to have 2 shots on each guy average. You could obviously low roll and high roll. Let's go with averages. You then got to hit both. They still just hit on 3s, don't they, Wraith Knights? They don't hit on 2s.
3s with one reroll.
With 1 reroll, yeah. So let's say potentially after shooting at the 2 guys, maybe they drop a shot, which is, you know, it can happen. And then if they don't get any dev wounds, then you can choose to fortune dice 1 in and just dev wound a guy off, but
still got to roll 6 on the 2d6, which is not guaranteed, as we all know from 5-inch charges. There's a lot of ways for that to go wrong for the Eldar player.
Yeah, it's like not even that. If you flub that up and you manage, you know, you decide you don't get any 6s, then you just roll some 4-ups, and even if they do manage to get it and do 12 mortal wounds, like, congrats, you've killed like an 80-point character with your, like, how much Wraith Knights have? 475 or something? 470,
I think.
So he'd have to kill about near like 7 Chaos Lords to make it, yeah?
Yeah.
So like you said, the value just isn't there.
Yeah, it's nice not having anything that's a real hard target, right? Other than Mortarion, which, Mortarion sometimes just eats it. He definitely did take 66 mortal wounds and die on turn 2 into one of the other players.
It happens.
sometimes he just does that. But yeah, mostly it's, you know, if you want to try and kill a squad of 10 Blightlord Terminators, Devastating Wounds is a great way to do that. You want to kill 2 Chaos Lords? Cool, man. That's 2 turns of Wraith Knight shoot.
Yeah. So one thing that I noticed is on one of your games, I believe, and you write up, you mentioned that you lost your Land Raider turn 1, and is it a Plague Burst Crawler?
Yeah, I lost a Land Raider and a Plague Burst Crawler in the first game against Eldar on turn 1.
So I need to ask did you manage to win this Eldar game?
Yeah, I won this one 12-8, like about 15-point difference, I think it was.
Nice.
So I'm gonna quote the Death Guard Facebook group. He lost his Land Raider and Plague Burst Crawler turn 1. There's no way he won this without cheating. Can you please explain?
So the general principle of that is that it turns out when Mortarion just refuses to fail saves, he can be quite difficult for Wraith Knights. This game basically came down to my opponent's turn 1 shooting into me was the first Wraith Knight fired at the Land Raider with it popping smoke, and then I think he hit 4 times on 4 shots because, you know, -1 to hit means nothing to Eldar players. They just cheat. Or they, you know, put in their dice or whatever, you know, same thing. And then he managed to do, I want to say with that, managed to do like 6 damage to a total, put it down to like a fairly decent amount of wounds. Then both Fire Prisms fired at it, and with the -1 to hit, it actually came up here, because with fortune rolling, you can still miss. And it went down to, and I passed, I think I double 6 2 saves here, or I like on 5-ups to not take as much damage from the Fire Prisms, and went down to 3 health, which then died to the Night Spinner as the last activation he had of the turn. And then the other one shot, the other Wraith Knight fired its 1 Wraith Cannon and picked up a Plague Burst Crawler, which I was a little upset about, but, you know, it happens. I think it might have been a Wraith Knight and like the other gun of one of the Fire Prisms, something like that. So I ended up going down a little bit of stuff there, but I was fairly well positioned in that I had gone first in the battleground, and I was sitting on, all three objectives that were in my half of the board. I was on my home objective with sticky control, and then I had both the middle objectives with enough stuff on them that he couldn't have gotten to them without walking significant to threat range. So I picked up a 12 primary, I got a good turn of tactical cards for the second turn, and then I drove forward and I hard whiffed, like just one of the worst turns of my life. I dropped in Typhus to put, so I had done 7 damage to the Wraith Knight on turn 1 with a las cannon, and I had now both the Playbrush Crawlers with their top guns ready to go into it. I had Mortarion's like dev wound shooting, and I had Typhus. I had a charge into it with Nurglings. I had a charge into it with Typhus, and a few other things. And then I had like 4 guns with four of the combo weapons and stuff like that to shoot into it. So I was like, reasonable chance I kill it this turn. Typhus then immediately smites himself, and I'm like, oh, for goodness sake, just roll the 1 instead of getting DC mortal wounds. I took 2 myself. Both my entropy cannons, all 4 shots missed into a fire prism. Typhus misses his 9-inch charge. The Nurglings missed their 5-inch charge, and I've already CP rerolled Typhus' charge. I'm just like, oh, not like this. I was like feeling like I was in a really good position. I've picked up, I think, Illic Night Spear's unit. I got into combat with it, and he passed all but 1 invulnerable save from the Chaos Lord that got into combat with them. I'm just like, oh, this is horrible.
That is a turn from hell, that one. That is a nightmare.
It was genuinely one of the saddest turns I've ever seen. My opponent was like a little upset about his turn 1 shooting. I'm like, that was like a 40% turn. This was like a 5% turn.
Oh, the Eldar player is upset. Oh.
Yeah, but just remember that this Eldar player did have to go home and tell his friends that he lost the Death Guard with double Wraith Knight. So it's okay to feel a little bad for him because he did have to go through that. I'm sorry, Mark. I love you, really. So from there, it basically comes down to, I feel like I had a position that I could have won the game. I'd played to my outs. It hadn't worked, and I'm now going to get punished. Mortarion is sat like 10 inches behind the bottom right objective. I've got 2 Playbrush Crawlers in that gap ready to drive towards it. I've got a sticky hold on that with the Poxwalker that's walked off it, but I'm standing so that he can't drop anything onto it. I'm like an inch behind the objective so that he has to walk a fire prism onto it or fire and fade onto it to get onto it, instead of just being able to like deep strike in Mork Spiders. And he's burning through CP pretty fast because he's playing tactical. He's not playing tactical, he's playing fixed into me. Or no, he was playing tactical, so but he wasn't getting the extra CP from it, so he was burning like 1 on Fire and Fade, 1 on Phantasm, and 1 on Overwatch in both of my turns, so he didn't really have a ton of CP to play with. So I was like, there's no way he's going to be able to Fire and Fade here. He then shoots a Wraith Knight, 2 Fire Prisms, and the other Wraith Knight into Mortarion, and Mortarion, I want to say, took 5 damage.
Wow.
And it was just the only damage he took. So I popped the stealth on him, I command rerolled a Wraith Cannon save, and then I just rolled reasonably well on everything else. And the only damage I took that turn was 1 Shuriken Cannon wound and 1 devastating wound from a Wraith Cannon that he auto-sixed.
Wow.
And it was just very nice turn. Typhus gets charged by the Wraith Knight, Typhus dies, the other Wraith Knight is kind of sat back. I do have, at this point though, have a Chaos Lord that's not been shot, that's sat like 6 inches away from my opponent's home objective, just adding repetitive damage. And I drop the Wraith Knight a couple wounds, I drop the Autarch Wayleaper a couple of wounds, I finish off and then the next turn, all the other Chaos Lords dogpile out, charge into this Ranger squad, get another stuff onto his objective, get another turn of just putting that aura out. Mortarion hits a charge into the Wraith Knight, pops Inexorable for +1 AP, and whatever the sustained hits one is, and rips the Wraith Knight to death.
Nice.
And then Poxwalkers charge both Fire Prisms, which I do first. So Mortarion at this point move forward, gets Overwatch, passes the 1 save he has to take, and then I just charge stuff with just get the Poxwalkers in. Only one of them can shoot, otherwise they're -1 to hit. It's just a free stratagem that I'm using. At this point, I've lost my home objective, and I've just got repetitive damage building up. And then he takes another turn, he fires the 1 Wraith Knight that's left at Mortarion, he doesn't die again. I think he goes down to 3 wounds here, to the 1 remaining Fire Prism and the Wraith Knight. And then the aura from the Chaos Lord triggers again, drops the Wraith Knight to 4 wounds.
Nice.
So it took 7 from a last cannon, and now it's taken, I want to say, another 7 from the 2 Playbrush Crawlers that shot at the 1 turn, and then the Lord of Contagion aura. So I think that's been 2 from the Playbrush Crawlers and 5 from the Desiccation Conduit.
Just that value adding up, isn't it?
Just been fairly reasonable. He's also at this point, I think, killed the Wayleaper by himself, which he killed with shooting. And then Mortarion goes out and pops his Plague Wind or whatever it's called, and gets 3 6s to wound and a 1/1, which he rerolls into another 6, mortal wounding it to death.
Nice.
I just picked up the second Wraith Knight on turn 3, and then from there, or on turn 4, and then from there, I just have control of his home objective. He's got control of my back objective. He ends up drawing like behind enemy lines, teleport homers and capture on the outpost to score pretty reasonably on cards on the back turns, which ended up keeping a little closer than it otherwise would have been. But he just had no objective control. He was down to like a Farseer and 10 Warp Spiders, or 10 like Shadow Spectres Warp Spiders, and that was it. And I had, you know, all my characters left, one Playper Crawler left running around, and he just didn't have any stuff left. It just was kind of like the exactly right sequence of events where I had a really bad turn, and then he had a really bad turn back, and my punish on his bad turn was worse than his punish on mine.
Nice.
The mission helped a ton. Him not getting any primary until turn 3, other than like the 2 for holding his home objective. He got like a 2, and then I want to say like an 8 and an 8 and a 6, and I went 12-12, like 12-12, 10-10 or something like that on primary, just holding down both the side objectives that he could never get to, because I had to control the midboard. And that was all it really came down to, was just understanding that my win condition was deploy on the line, push to go first, and be in position that even if I take a bunch of damage, because I'm going to take a bunch of damage, it's 2 Wraith Knights and 2 Fire Prisms, something's going to die, but Mortarion could hide behind a wall, wasn't getting shot, so it's firing at stuff that's got a 2-up save, in cover, and an invulnerable save. There is a chance it goes wrong. And all you have to do when you're playing an army that's better than you is give them a chance to F up. Because, well, you're not going to win if they play perfectly, so just assume they're not going to play perfectly. Assume you're going to high roll. Assume you're going to win. Just play to win, right? That's all it really comes down to.
So on that, that's a really good note, because a lot of people are going to try and disregard this as, oh, you just got lucky. And the thing is, there's a difference between just getting lucky, and luck here wouldn't have won the day for Ennis, because Ennis had to put himself in a position where, as if he knew basically if the cards don't fall in his favor, it's pretty much a loss. Because, like he said, if the Eldar player plays perfectly, given the power disparity between the factions, you lose, like regardless of what you do. So he had to put himself in a position where if something happens, such as Mortarion spiking saves, Wraith Knights low rolling, etc., that he's there to capitalize on it. I had the same sort of thing happen in Leeds with myself. I was playing against the rank 1 UK Custodes player.
Michael Armour, yeah.
Yeah, Michael Armour. And there was a point where basically in the middle he had a unit of, is it the Wardens, the ones with the 4-up feel no pain?
Yep.
And I basically was starting to get hemmed in. He was playing quite MSU on his Custodes, so a lot of pressure coming in, and I knew I needed to basically do a breakout. I needed to get some big swing that needed to happen in the mid board for me to be able to, you know, start getting points back on the board. So I had to commit more time into the middle. He did some work, but then I knew he was going to get charged by the group of 6 Wardens. So basically, my entire thing was hope the Wardens flub it, and he charged them in. He dropped Mortarion down to 2 wounds, I think, because I rolled really well on the feel no pains. And then Mortarion on the swing back, I did the same thing you did with that Wraith Knight. I popped the sustained hits. Just, I know he's not got many attacks to proc it, but again, you're basically praying at this point, aren't you? So managed to get the 2 extra hits, managed to get 6 wounds onto the unit, and he failed every single 4-up, and his entire unit of Wardens just vanished. And like a swing like that is the kind of thing that you said there when he had his flub turn, or Mortarion saved it.
When you're playing a game on a knife's edge, if you have something like that happen to you, it can lose you a game from any position. And it's understanding that, yeah, if you both play the game perfectly, sure, the Eldar player is going to beat you every time. But nobody has ever played a perfect game of Warhammer in their life, and it's not going to start happening with the other player that you're sitting across from just now. If you don't give them an opportunity to make mistakes, you're still never going to win the game. If you don't try to high roll, you know? There is a reason that 9-inch charges exist. They were put in the game so that 28% of the time you can hit a charge from Deep Strike. Is it a thing that you should rely on, and if you're in a winning position? No. If you fill a 9-inch charge and you were winning the game and you're losing the game now because you've just tried to fake a 9-inch charge, you should probably reconsider whether your game plan needed you to make that 9-inch charge, because you didn't, you know, you were going to lose that game 72% of the time anyway, if that was your plan, and you can't be upset about that. But if your game plan is hit that 9-inch charge because it's the only thing that'll win you the game, and you don't hit it, well, then you're like, oh, cool, makes no difference, I was losing anyway. And if you hit it, cool, now you're in it. And then you just got to keep doing things like that. All being a stronger army means is that you get more opportunity to make mistakes and more opportunity for things to go wrong before you're playing an even game again. And, you know, because every game, at the end of the day, all it's about is scoring one more point than your opponent did. And if your opponent keeps making mistakes and giving you opportunities, you can keep putting score on that board and you can keep taking away their opportunities too. And if their army is better than yours, yeah, cool. They get to make less mistakes. They get to make more mistakes before you feel back to even. You can have a turn, you know, an Elder player can have a turn where they just do no damage and it doesn't matter because the Elder is strong enough that they can get away with that. But they probably can't have 2. So play for them having 2, right? If you can't afford to, if you can't win going second anyway, well then why hide, right? Deploy on the line, play to go first.
That makes sense. I mean, there's also dice opportunity, isn't there? You know, set yourself in a position where, like you said yourself, if you're up against it, where a 9-inch charge, if it swings a game, you know, sometimes it's worth it. If you're going to lose anyway, why not? You know, sometimes even a 10, 11-inch charge if you've lost anyway, but that charge sort of swings it. So that makes good sense. I mean, one of the things I also wanted to ask Ennis, and kind of links nicely to what Aiden said when he referenced his UKTC sort of result as well. What was the terrain like at the event that you played at?
So we were playing on the WTC medium boards. So very broadly, it's like 4 absolutely huge 9x5 inch ruins. Imagine like the UKTCL, but it's cut off on one of the sides. There's only 5 inches wide instead of 9 inches wide. And then 6 more small ruins that are the same size as that, but they're only 2 stories high instead of 3 stories high, and they're facing the other way. So it's kind of like a bigger version of the UKTC small Ls that are like also like close to 12 inches long. Because they have massive massive bases that hide terrain. It was very difficult to move a Land Raider. It's actually part of the reason why I ended up drawing my first game, is that I had not thought about how do you move a Land Raider on this terrain before. And I think I would have had a better time if I had tried that at least once before the event, but my Land Raider showed up at, like 9:05 the day before the tournament, or the day of the tournament, so not a lot of time to practice that. Playbrush crawlers also were prone to getting themselves jammed up, but there's no gap that's too small for Mortarion to go through, which was definitely nice.
Yeah, because that was what I was teeing up in regards to the Land Raider, because I mean I was trying one for a little bit, and I tried on some UKTC boards, and with the current maps, there's a couple of deployments where you literally can't deploy it and you can't move it through the terrain either, because the sponsons make it about 6 inches wide.
For what it's worth, the Land Raider wasn't very good, so I don't think it's too much of a loss. It was nice to have access to the lance cannons from it, but I would honestly probably just run 2 Predator Destructors in its place and be fairly happy with that. I was very impressed with that data sheet when reading through it, given the rest of the context of how the game's played. And I think I could probably replace it with like 2 Predator Destructors of Rhino and cutting a character and be fairly happy with that situation wise. They were never charging out of the Rhino, out of the Land Raider anyway. That was so rarely a thing that actually happened, because most people aren't bad enough to give you that kind of opportunity. It was mostly just they were using the Land Raider for speed and positioning turn 1, and the Rhino was faster. So that would have actually been probably a fairly reasonable upgrade for doing the same thing. Obviously, you can't put the Death Guard Chaos Lords in it, the Terminator ones, but you can run the foot ones who are 1 less wound, 1 less toughness, and 1 less save, but they keep the invulnerable save, or you can just deep strike the Chaos Lords and play fairly similar.
That's quite good, yeah. I suppose, because across the costs as well, you might need to shave a few extra points to sort of fit those extra bits in, so I suppose the one without Terminator armor is also cheaper, so that might help in sort of getting that in.
Yeah, they're 15 points cheaper, I want to say. And they do the same damage, and they have the same armor, so.
That's quite interesting then, because that was one of the things that I was curious about, as to what were the changes that you might make, because obviously terrain, and also asking how important the Land Raider was as a sort of launching point. But you've answered that question there, and that's obviously something that's really interesting then. So, because obviously I dropped a little bit there. I don't know if people sort of listening sort of realise or not. So I'm a little bit sort of out the loop in what was being taught in the last game. But what sort of what happened in the other games that you sort of found were quite important? What was the what were the other sort of like big swing moments, or moments where you sort of found the list was really sort of put through its paces?
Sure. So one thing I will say is that the single best unit in the army was actually Typhus deep striking by himself. Across all 5 games, he was the unit that I was the most impressed with, and I genuinely just think he was a good unit that I would be happy to play in almost any army I've ever played. The fact that he has on a 2+, 18-inch range, take D6 mortal wounds, on a 1 he smites himself, cool, that never happens, pretend anyway. And on a 6 he does D3+3 instead. But it's not notably a shooting attack, which means that he can do it while doing actions, he can do it while shooting a unit, he can put it onto units in combat, he can put it onto lone operatives, all this kind of thing.
How many lone ops did you snipe?
He really tried to kill 2. Really tried.
I think so far in my last event, I had him pick up 2 Hazardous assassins and 2 saboteurs. It's a fun feeling when they're like, wait, what? And you're like, yeah, you're dead.
So he killed, I want to go with across my games, I want to say he killed, it's like 5 damage on a Repulsor Executioner that I got to finish off with shooting.
Nice.
He killed 4 Wraith Guard by himself, I want to say, in one of the games. 2 of the games he failed the power, one into Abaddon Squad, which would have been the difference between my Mortarion living and dying that turn, which was a shame. He did hit the charge that game though, which was nice. And then
Black 3 damage Scythe as well, not bad.
It's not
Strength 9 as well.
And then I think he put some damage on like a Primaris Tech Marine. He killed like a couple of crisis suits over the course of the game, just like little bits here and there. But the nice thing with it is because it's not a shooting attack, you can do it while you're doing actions, which means that he can actually just like come down and deploy a teleport homer in a corner and just say, you have to deal with this. I'm threatening that objective next turn, but I'll take my 4 points while I let something else get into position, and I'll shoot you as well because it's not, it's not restricted. So
nice.
It was quite nice. Points, I think he's genuinely one of the best Death Guard like data sheets. I've used him in every list, and I've never once sat there going, I wish I could, I don't really feel Typhus. Like, every game he's put in so much work, whether it's with Poxwalkers or solo or with Death Shroud. I think he's a great unit.
Yeah, he was also just very solid for dropping in and being a thing that hits a 4-inch charge from ingress. Like, a lot of armies just don't love dealing with that. He can, pop stratagems on him for inexorable or sustained hits to try and get his damage up a little bit. But, baseline, he'll hit a squad and be annoying to it. Maybe make it take a battle shock, maybe flip an objective by himself, especially combined with the shooting output, which I was fairly happy with.
I mean, it kind of leads, because one of the things I mentioned at the start when I sort of saw your list, and I was wondering if, I wondered if they were meant to be sort of Lords of Contagion, because Lords of Contagion have got a similar combat profile to Typhus. Obviously, they don't do the mortal wounds thing, but it's pretty much the same combat profile, just with one less attack at 100 points.
Yeah, and they do when they take damage, they bounce back mortals, I want to say.
They do, yeah.
Oh, shit.
And they also re-roll the hits as well. So they're probably about as efficient as Typhus,
unfortunately
actually.
have to be leading a squad to get the reroll hits. All of the Death Guard Chaos slots have a reroll ones ability, but only while they're leading a squad. And man, what I wouldn't have done to have that ability all the time. Yeah, it definitely was a little bit sad. Losing out on a bunch of the Lord of Virulence doesn't care because he rerolls wounds anyway for Twin Linked.
Why? Don't. That rule annoys me so much.
Yeah, the Twin Linked thing.
But then the Typhus doesn't get his -1 to hit, and the Death Guard Chaos Lords don't get their reroll ones. But it never really matters. They're not there for doing that. They're there to be annoying and be obnoxious. Any damage they do is just upside. They're mostly there to make your opponent fall back. And
did you ever attach Typhus to the Poxwalkers? Was that something that
not
you
a
considered?
single time? No.
Oh, okay.
Typhus, I need fast assets in this list. I do not have enough stuff that can get to my opponent's deployment zone or go and cause problems or threaten objectives. This list is very honest once it's on the table. And the Poxwalkers are mostly there to make sure my opponent can't, what you're usually trying to do with them is stick you two objectives and stand them between the two objectives so that they cover the 9-inch deep strike aura on both of them, but aren't necessarily standing on both of them, so they don't give up cards like Overwhelming Force, but your opponent can't deep strike onto them, and just hopefully staying out of line of sight with that as well.
Because obviously the Poxwalkers are an interesting tech choice over the Cultists, because obviously the Cultists have the 6-inch scout move because they move 6 inches. Was there a reason why? Did you sort of weigh them up against each other, and what was the sort of thought process?
The Poxwalkers just give you that little bit of the feel no pain resilience was basically all it was that I just wanted them to, if my opponent comes down, I want to not randomly die to the kind of things that are going to be fighting them. When I think about what's going to be fighting in that backfield, it's stealth suit teams from crisis squads and things like that. They're just going to be fighting, or warp spiders in combat that they're going to charge and just try to hold there. And cultists will eventually die to that. Poxwalkers die a little slower. Occasionally your opponent will fail that save and you'll get a model back. It was just enough slightly better that I wanted the speed, because they weren't going to be. I have the double Nurgling squads to use the scout move anyway. I don't need that.
It's also better for indirect as well. Better to have the Poxwalker to feel no pain.
Yeah, exactly. There's always that chance of just scamming a save.
No, that's quite good. So yes, you use them as more of an anvil then. I mean, not that cultists are any kind of a hammer at all, but obviously the cultists can kind of push to the mid board and stick you an objective, if you get lucky with sort of first turn, whereas the Poxwalkers, their idea was they're not going to move too much, you're just going to stand there and just keep your home field safe.
Yeah, exactly. They're just going to sit there and be toughness 4 with a 5 of Philippine and be slightly more useful in that use case, because like I said, with the Player Controllers, they're playing a lot more aggressively. They're not really sitting in the backfield. Obviously, sometimes they will, because you can never plan a game of 40k precisely. Sometimes the Player Controller just had to sit out line of sight of things, but most of the time they want to be playing fairly aggressively, getting wraps and tags and things like that, where the Poxwalkers just support the backfield better.
The other thing we've not mentioned once, and again, this is obviously a big part of the list because you've got 3 of them. Talk us about Blightspawn. How did you find them?
Foul Blightspawn were fantastic. Genuinely my favorite unit from the list in terms of a use case scenario. I think Typhus was the best unit in the list, but the Foul Blightspawn were the most fun to use. They just are exactly the right amount of obnoxious damage output that your opponent has to respect them, but also should in no way respect them whatsoever. Because the consistency of them doing damage is basically nil. They're D6 shots, they're wounding on 2s, they're almost never in Mortarion's range, but they pop out of a Land Raider and suddenly there's 3 units that all have the capacity to threaten a unit in your opponent's face. And they have to now decide how much they want to play around them. Do they want to play around the Overwatch? once they get charged by them, it's just a toughness 5 character sat in combat with them. You know, do you have units that can deal with that, or do you have to shoot them? They're just obnoxious, in your face, annoying. I'm 99% sure they have the grenade keyword. Not that I ever really used it from them.
They do.
They can
yeah,
always
they,
chuck a couple of. They can always chuck a couple more wounds out if you want to. So it's just another little thing. I was mostly grenading from Mortarion because that is one keyword he does have, and I enjoyed that very much.
Phosphex bombs.
So yeah, it was just another little thing to be in my opponent's face, and if it has to stand on an objective, cool, it's 55 points. I don't care. If it has to do an action, I don't care. It's 55 points. If I have to throw something into the open to stop my opponent screening, cool, it's 55 points, and it's got a functional movement of 8 plus d6 out of the Land Raider. If I need to get a screen in position, it's got that. And that was what I liked them for. And then there's always the option, you can always do things like strat reserve them. I never ended up doing that because I like my clown card too much. But definitely would have been a viable option. They're reasonable Overwatch threats. Like, a lot of things don't want to get shot by them. And yeah, again, just another thing that can kick out that Nurgle's Gift aura to just project a little bit of minus 1 toughness to back up the shooting.
Don't forget that fights first in case someone charges. You get a couple
only
shanks
while, only while he's leading a squad.
Dude, that was coming as well. God damn it! You don't even get your free shanks in. Oh.
No, you don't even get your free shanks. He definitely did kill like non-zero models in combat, or do non-zero wounds. I don't know if he killed any models, but yeah, they were great. For 55 points, I had absolutely no complaints. I'll never forget the day of them being D6 shots, 2d6 strength at AP 3 damage 3. I will never forget it when they were 77 points, but yeah, sadly not the day. But I would never even consider running them attached to the Plague Marines.
Plague Marines just aren't worth it.
But on their own, I would 100% run 3 in almost every list. I think they were just great.
Okay, that's because it leads back into what we said at the start about how the Death Guard characters are actually some of the most point efficient units in the index. It's just no one ever spams them, and I've always thought the view, you have to attach to a Plague Marine squad, but as your list shows, actually maybe you don't. Well, probably you don't. In fact, as we're talking through it, it's making a lot of sense, and it's kind of opened up sort of new sort of build ideas that I think had been overlooked until this point. And it actually leads me to the next question about the list, because obviously we can go back to talk about the games. I'm sure if there's anything else you want to sort of throw in there or talk about, but Plague Burst Callers, Entropy Cannons versus the Spitters. To me, the Entropy Cannons, I found them quite underwhelming, but at the same time, when I've run 3, I found 2 with Spitters and 1 with Entropy Cannons. They are weirdly useful, because sometimes you just need 2 anti-tank shots. Half the time they don't hit, I find, but it's that opportunity there. Was that something? Was it? I'm assuming it wasn't just because you had them modelled that way. Was it like a conscious choice, and what was the thinking?
So I have always been a fan of being a little longer range with an army like this. There is so much capacity. Once this list is within 12 of you already, it is probably having a good time. If I can just charge you with a Plague Burst Crawler, that I'm almost just as happy with that as shooting and killing you. So I would rather just have that little bit of reach. I mean, as much as it's, Entropy Cannons are 24 inch range, we'll all remember the day where they were 36 and it was great, they're unreliable, but your opponent can't ignore them. Your opponent has to sit there and think, there is 6 Entropy Cannons and 4 Las Cannons on this board. That is, on average, I'm going to take 4 or 5 wounds from Las Cannons this turn if I let them all shoot me, and they have a 34 inch threat range. Can I withstand that? And then a lot of opponents will look at that and go, no, so I have to play back. Or, yes, but I have to deal with them. And then your opponent will commit resources in a way, and it just gives them more opportunity to make mistakes, for things to go wrong, for you to high roll, If I kind of just go into it assuming that I'm going to do no damage from my Entropy Cannons, and if I get 3 or 4 wounds out of them, then even better, because I've assumed nothing from them. They're mostly there to fire the heavy slugger.
I've found that's weirdly the best weapon on there. Like, the AP1 comes in useful way more than you'd think, mainly in the sense of sometimes you can sort of shoot some that's not in cover, and like I say, the 4 shots as well, they kind of add up over the
plus 36 inch range was surprisingly useful. And then the Plague Burst Mortar is about as swingy as it gets. Sometimes it's useful, sometimes it's not. I will say I found the Lord of Virulence really underwhelming in this list, but I mostly just never got him into a position where he could do anything. I think if he was running with a squad, he would have been a lot more useful for me, but the solo Lord of Virulence is definitely something I would cut from the list. He just was never particularly interesting or useful for the way that the army actually played.
Okay, that's an interesting point.
So obviously I want to be a bit conscious of taking your time in this, because I'm sure you're going to be very busy tomorrow. Those who don't know, that the balanced data slate is dropping tomorrow.
I think I have my schedule booked from 3 p.m. till midnight tomorrow. Yes.
I can imagine. So I don't want to take too much more of your time. The only thing I'd like to know from you is sort of like, how do you feel? Like, obviously, don't feel like you have to go in mega in depth to it, but sort of, how do you feel about Death Guard's current position, the feel of the army, etc., and sort of maybe some hopes for tomorrow's data slate, what you'd like to see, and sort of what would make you happy to sort of bring Death Guard to your like RTTs and GTs, like you said you used to do. It's not really like an army, unless it is an army you're looking to like want to main.
Hey, if Death Guard ended up being top 5, I'd 100% play Death Guard at tournaments. That's usually what I'm looking for, is top 5 with skill expression, and I'll play an army. That's kind of where I'm aiming at as somebody who's trying to win super majors, right? For Death Guard right now, I definitely felt you can feel the cracks in the armor, right? When you're playing them, you can't get to objectives outside of specifically transports and deep strike. There is no real staying power in the army. It felt like everything was half a turn too fragile, is kind of how I would describe it. A unit that I would expect to live through my opponent's shooting phase and then take a fight phase would die in the shooting phase. My unit that I would expect to die in the fight phase would die to the first unit charging it, and then the other unit would get to pile into something else and hit that. It just felt like it was a little bit slow on that side, and I really just felt like there was either not enough stuff for it. Like Plagueburst Crawlers at 175 compared to a Fire Prism at 150 is genuinely a crime. I know they're not really like the same, but I mean, to put it more, a Plagueburst Crawler compared to like an Armiger is probably the better comparison.
Yeah.
And an Armiger just does more in every way, shape, and form. I'm thinking sort of like a Brigand or a Helverin. It's just difficult to justify them. A lot of that comes off the back of Mortarion's aura being very powerful, and Nurgle's Gift being genuinely a good aura that is incredibly hard to deliver and has a very weird amount of anti-synergy with the breakpoints that the army's been given, where it feels like by the time you've delivered Nurgle's Gift aura, the amount of resources you've had to spend to do that, you don't have anything left to make use of the aura. So it definitely felt like I wanted, if I could spitball like one thing, I would like 12-inch range on Plagueburst Crawlers on the mortar, not the mortar, the entropy cannon, so that gun feels like it's a las cannon instead of a terrible las cannon.
Yeah, so putting it to 36 a game.
Yeah, put it to even 30 would be fine. Like just give it that extra little burst of range. I would like to see the general points haircuts that most things want. I would have loved to run things like Death Shrouds, but for 140 for 3 models, it's very hard to justify a model that's more expensive than a Custodian Guard that does about a third of what a Custodian Guard does.
I mean, the entropy cannons as well, the strength being 10 is a travesty. They should be strength 13 or 14 for the low number of shots and the ballistic skill on there.
Mate, I'd take 12 to make him a last cannon.
Honestly, I would be fine with so for the Plagueburst Crawlers, I think I would actually prefer to see points cuts on them because they're not resilient, and I don't think that I want them to be an expensive and good shooting unit. I want them to be a cheap and cheerful wall break that sometimes hits entropy cannon shots. Like I don't actually need it to do damage. That's not what I'm really looking for. I would like the range so that it can threaten it, and then it to be like a 140 point unit so that it can just sit in front of my opponent. I don't care if it dies because it's just slightly too expensive to be that right now, and it's a great wall. It's a very, very good just be in the way model. Mortarion is slightly too expensive and honestly just needs more attacks. Like that was the main thing that Mortarion.
It's so frustrating because his aura is so good. Like I love his auras so much.
Yeah, both his auras are completely fine. Like the reroll ones is okay, but when you get into combat and you kill 2 Terminators, it feels a little hard done by. The saddest combat I've seen this edition is him charging Abaddon's squad, killing 2 Terminators, and then Abaddon one-shotting him.
Yeah.
I had 2 turns with Mortarion, couldn't kill Imperial Guard Scout Sentinel with the 4-pin bun that he was getting from it was the most embarrassing thing I've ever seen from such a big pointed model.
I would realistically like to see him have like one more attack in Dev Wounds or something, just like make him feel useful.
Would you rather him come down in points or stay the points he is and get like an improvement?
Rather
like that?
He stayed the points he isn't, because that's the kind of thing. There's a, when you're talking about balance and stuff like that, you kind of have to make sure you're hitting the feel, like the mouth feel of a unit. Yeah. I don't want a 300 point Primarch. It doesn't feel right. I would rather have a 400 point Primarch that feels like a 400 point Primarch. Magnus feels great, right? Magnus is arguably too cheap for 420 points that he is, but Magnus is what Mortarion should feel like, and Magnus is only 50 points more expensive than Mortarion.
I mean, Angron doesn't feel terrible either, to be honest.
No, Angron's great. He's just trapped in a terrible index. The Lion is great at 380. Guilliman is arguably a little bit too much of a buff bot, but yeah. So I think Mortarion, I would rather he felt like a unit. I would rather he felt like an unstoppable juggernaut that you paid the points for. Like he already doesn't, and I would give him deep strike. That's the other thing. Why does he not deep strike?
I don't know.
But to avoid it going too wish listy and to stay more on the, like, I get the whole like points haircuts is nice. You could probably trim like a couple of points here and there off of things, like 5 points off an average Terminator model, a couple points off a Plague Marine. But I don't want to see like 100 Plague Marines be the list that you play.
So we did that last edition, and everything's so cheap, it's annoying.
You don't want Space Marines to feel like a horde. They're meant to be like an elite brick anvil. So that probably means like durability buffs. You could honestly probably do another round of +1 toughness on everything in the army besides Mortarion.
Yeah, I think we could get -1 damage back as well and keep the same points.
Yeah.
It'd be fine. I think that would still only put us to B tier.
I'll say the one that I floated as being like the one that I would like to see is everything gets a 6 up Feel No Pain, and then if you've got a leader, for every leader in the squad, you get another +1. So that would be
good.
like
That'd be fun.
Space Marine, Plague Marine start at a 6 up, the vehicles get a 6 up, and that's flat, and you can't put that to a 5. Because I'll be frank, 2 up save vehicles with a 5 up Feel No Pain are frustrating as all hell to kill.
Super obnoxious.
Like a 6 up would be fine. It's like, it's an Armiger. Like, we're all dealing with Armigers. But Plague Marines get up to a 5 up, Death Guard get up to 5 up, and then Plague Marines only with a variant would get to a 4 up, which would maybe help them feel actually durable enough that they can get into do their damage. But I don't think they're going to go that route because it's a massive diversion change. So I think the thing that you probably want is like, I would like to see a little bit more damage across the army so that it actually hurts when it gets there, and a little bit more capacity for it to be survivable on the way through, and then points haircuts. I think that's what's pretty reasonable, is more damage when it's there, a little more support getting there, and 10% more stuff so that you can, fit that extra, you can fit that extra Rhino in with 10 Plague Marines inside it, that kind of thing, rather than just getting the Plague Marines for the points.
I just want to see, I think you mentioned in your podcast as well, I just want to feel that when someone comes near Death Guard, they're making a mistake. Like, you're about to, like, you come within that contagion range, you're about to be punished, so you have to come in with that knowledge, because right now, -1 toughness I think is good, and a lot of people whinge about it, and it's not as bad as people make out, but I just wish it had just like, a little bit of extra, just bit of punishment to punish those people that try and do that mid-board brawl where Death Guard sort of want to be.
Yeah, and honestly, like, the Desiccation Conduit felt great for that. Like, that guy the Living Plague guy especially, felt incredible. He felt like the exact thing of a Death Guard. Like, you are in the Death Guard zone, the wall has gotten to you, and now you are being punished for the wall being there. And I think that kind of thing is great. Death Guard should not be a fast army. They should not be...
No.
They're probably not meant to be, like, an incredible shooting platform like we saw a little bit in sort of, like, 8th and 9th edition, where you had, like, 5 Plagueburst Crawlers and things like that. That's not really the thematic identity for Death Guard. They should be the unstoppable force that when it hits you, like, sure, it's going to struggle, and I think Death Guard are always going to have that bit of thematic identity difficulty, where the thing that they are designed to be is not a thing that is good at Warhammer. That's just kind of like the inherent problem with Death Guard.
Movement wins games, and by its nature, Death Guard is... It's like you said before, when you said Death Guard is on the table, it's a very honest army, and honest armies without all the tricks to be able to do stuff genuinely aren't like the top spot dogs. But I would like, at least if I'm playing honest...
Yeah, or they're the top spot because they're broken, right? There's kind of no in-between for Death Guard. They're either going to be a little weak or going to be far too strong. Because if Death Guard are an unstoppable force that shoots reasonably well, that punishes you for coming close to it, well, that's just kind of like current Custodes and Necrons, right? Which are just static armies that are fairly honest on the board that punish you massively for getting too close. And Death Guard should be inside that thematic identity as well, I think. It's weird that those armies have more Feel No Pains than Death Guard do, but I also think that getting Nurgle away from being just the Feel No Pain army is probably fine, and giving them more of a thematic identity. As much as it hurts to look back at, like 6th, 7th, and 8th edition lists.
So, I had one thing to say before we finish. One more question to ask you, and this kind of obviously, as Aiden said, I know we're running on a little bit, but obviously you'd look through the Death Guard index, and I'm sure a lot of people sort of listening would be interested to know, were there any other sort of list archetypes that you looked at or considered? I mean, for example, did you look at allying knights? Were there any other sort of like builds that you thought about? Any of the units that you maybe thought about trying? Because I think that's something that might be interesting to sort of just sort of hear your thoughts on as well.
Well, I can burn through all of my street cred that I've earned with Death Guard players immediately. I missed the second ability on the Death Guard Terminator Sorcerer, and 100% would have considered them. I did not realize it had that ability. So, like, I'll put my hands up and say that one. I didn't realize it was occasionally damage 3. I probably would have put one of them in over one of the Chaos Lords just to have that burst of damage. I really like the Predator Destructor. I just think it's got a very good profile for the things that Death Guard are looking for. It's just a bunch more high damage. You're running it with double las cannon and Predator eye cannon. It's just long range, 48-inch. It's another 6 shots that can hit and makes really good use of Mortarion's aura. And it's not expensive. It's 140 points. I could probably justify running 3 of them over the Blightspawns Crawlers, or 3 of them with the Blightspawns Crawlers. And I think that would be great. I also don't run any Predators. I still really like Death Shroud. I don't think they're perfect, but I think they do a very good job that I would consider running one squad of if I was going to try and take this list and make it more of a like a take all comers list that has a bit more of a play option, I would probably consider putting 3 of them in and either running them with Typhus or with one of the Chaos Swords inside the Land Raider, just to maybe like support that Living Plague aura a little bit better. But I also worry about making that too much of a target, and you could also just run them solo without a lead, or put in like a random, like the non-Living Plague one, so it's spreading out the power in the army. But just having a unit that could charge a squad on an objective and actually kill it would have been nice.
Yeah.
And I definitely feel like that could have been fine. I don't hate the Blight Hauler. It's again kind of just leaning into that. Another thing that can sit with Mortarion and be good in that aura. I prefer the Predator. And getting a Tallyman in would have been nice. The CP would have been good if I was going to play fixed as much as I did. I don't like the Chaos Knight allies. I think the Brigand is okay, but it's very short range and it's kind of not the kind of thing that you're needing. I want long range damage support was what I was finding I needed. And the Brigand is the best version of that with the chain cannon and the melter, and it just isn't without the Chaos Knight stratagems. I don't love it.
Because I've been trying one Carnivore and Death Guard list and found that was alright, mainly just to have something quick that could sort of clear an objective in combat, like you mentioned, where we struggle.
Yeah, one Carnivore would be great, actually. One Carnivore would definitely be really solid.
But only one, though. I tried sort of multiple ones and it found that they just got trapped behind walls and just piled on top of each other.
Yeah, losing Knights of Shade does hurt them. I could see one Carnivore. One Carnivore would be a really interesting inclusion. I also, unironically, kind of looked at Horticulous Slimex as just a random by himself ally, because he has like a weirdly decent set of rolls. He's like, he just like, you drive forward and then he's toughness 10 with a 4 vulnerable save and just does decent damage in combat. And I considered putting him in, and then I looked at his points cost and he's 120. Yeah. And if he was like 20 points cheaper, I think he would be a really interesting option just for a thing that is deep strikey and fast. Like he's movement 6, which in the Death Guard context is incredible, and he does reasonable damage doing like a deep strike and ingress. And I could see
he contaminates a piece of terrain as well. Or something,
he gives it Shadows of Chaos, which doesn't help, unfortunately.
Oh, okay, never mind.
But he's just 6 attacks that are not okay, that are not unreasonable, and OC2, so he can like flip objectives off Hazardous Assassin and things like that.
I found Beast and Nurgle do a similar job, actually. Like, I've tried one or two Beast and Nurgle in lists and found that they're alright. They can also kind of, over the space of a couple of turns, sort of doing 5 space marines or something and sort of cause a problem.
Yeah, exactly. Beast and Nurgle are 75, so they're probably where I would look. But I think kind of like, if you were talking a 25-point jump to go from a Beast and Nurgle to Slimex, if they were like 75 and 100, I'd do Slimex. Otherwise, Beast and Nurgle makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with Beast and Nurgle is they're 5 points cheaper than the Chaos, than the Death Guard, Terminator and Sorcerer. So Source and Terminator that you mentioned before, and then for the extra 5 points, he's probably better.
So yeah, that's kind of the immediate thoughts. There was nothing else that really like so that like I don't like the Plague Marine data sheet. It just doesn't really do anything.
Thank you.
I would, I don't know, if it got enough of a points cut, I would consider running them as just like pure shooting output with the Biological Putrefier that gives them the lethal hits.
Yeah, I feel like if you take Plague Marines, you have to take a Biological Putrefier. He's the only thing that makes them do something.
You can do like 3 squads of 10 with Biological Putrefiers, and then you put like a couple of combo weapons in there so that they can charge in, pop the sustained hits 1 strat, and then have crit 5s with crit and lethal, and then like you can kill a squad of War Spiders or a random like Autarch Wayleaper or Calidus Assassin, just like the kind of the idiot squads. But mostly they're just like they're there to shoot like plasma guns and metal guns at people, and that seems fine at a much cheaper point than price point than where they are just now, or with more damage.
What would be your ideal pointed price for Plague Marines then? Because I feel that's
But this is where I go and look at the points cost, and I'd be really upset about how many it is. Oh my god, it's 200 points.
20 points each at the moment, so 100 points for a squad of 5. What would you pay for them? I feel that's a good sort of a good closing statement.
Okay, so I have played a lot of shooting armors this edition. This unit is currently the same points as a Deathwatch veteran squad, which I played a ton of. And I'm looking at this, and this does less shooting and less combat and is slightly tougher. So I would say, conservatively, I would look at them at 160 plus whatever the character is.
And that's for 10, is it then, I assume?
For 10, yeah.
Yeah.
For 10. So that would be what, 4 points a model off?
Yeah, 16 ppm.
Yeah, I would start looking, and I think I would probably start looking at them at like, you cut 20 points off of that. I think depending on how the weapon workers load it, you'll know this better than me. But like the 7-man squad is actually fairly interesting. If the weapons work out that you can give it like most of the good stuff at 7, because it's like the Lord gets a plasma gun or the like champion gets a plasma gun, then you put in like one of each of the heavy weapons, and then like you have like 2 guys with fists left. I could see that as being like that plus a character, like one of the variants, and then like an extra foul Blightspawn inside a Rhino could actually work out pretty well. But like not going the full double attach. and just getting like 7 guys, so it's not mega expensive. And if that was sort of like 250 for the package with like the Rhino, the 2 characters, and the 7 guys, I would maybe start looking at about there as well. I think that's kind of where I would be looking for that, what that kind of the job that does. 250 to like 260.
I think currently it's more than 400 points for all that, which is the sad reality. But obviously tomorrow, we might, all our dreams might come true, and we might find that that those are the points. But from what you said there, I mean, I think that's a very fair analysis in the way you've compared it to other things in the meta. I mean, obviously those units that you referenced could go up in points depending on how DW see things.
Yeah, for sure. There's a very real aspect of there are other things you can change in the game that would make this stuff better, like mechanical changes to other things. Like I'm assuming you guys don't have a great time with towering. That would be a bit of a problem for Death Guard. Devastating wounds, there's not a ton of access to it in Death Guard, so any changes to that game wide would all be helpful. And that all kind of pushes the envelope of this is assuming that we're just talking point changes for Death Guard in the current environment, where I would start talking about playing them into not even into CSM and Space Marines, not even Eldar and Custodes, right? I'm fine with that. But there is a ton of scope for some really cool stuff in this army. It's got a lot of really cool options. I genuinely quite like the stratagem suite, having access to +1 AP and stealth and sustained hits in combat. The heal stratagem is one of the few in the game right now. The sticky objectives comes up more than I thought it would, as long as you can play a decent amount of backfield protection. It was genuinely fairly interesting to play. It was definitely a lot more of a challenge. It definitely challenged my ability to get the most out of the fight phase, getting lots of ability to use multi-charges to get additional consolidation, and trying to use them to kill a thing and then fire and fade back over the objective functionally with consolidation, things like that. And it was definitely interesting to try and get as much jank out of it as possible, and that was kind of why I took it, was to try and reignite a little bit of that let's try some stuff and try and get the most out of what isn't amazing. And that was really fun with it, and I really enjoyed it, and I would definitely poke again at the army. I'll definitely be taking a look at them again after the slate, because they interested me enough that I feel like I will give them another look.
Big respect to you, man. Yeah, like I said, we're all about trying to get positive looking at on Death Guard in this channel, so it's really good to hear. And obviously you had some incredible skill expression there, even with an army like you said that's not so tricksy. So I'm extremely happy with that. But I think at this point we'll probably wrap it up, because like I said, we want to respect your time. A very busy day tomorrow. Is there anything you'd like to plug? I'm sure there is.
Yeah, I'll plug StatCheck, because that's the main stuff. So I'm part of Team Scotland, but also my job at this point, I'm a professional 40k coach, which I do through StatCheck, which is our sort of podcast, our network. We do a bunch of stuff there with metadata and articles and all that sort of thing. I just published the StatCheck meta report today, which puts Death Guard squarely in 21st place of 21 armies, with less than half the win rate of Eldar right now, by the way. The win rate for Death Guard right now was 32 point something, and Eldar's is 68 point something, which is literally combined over 100%, which is frankly absurd and makes me upset. But yeah, so I do coaching through there. We do a podcast every Tuesday at 11 p.m. UK time, all that sort of thing. So if any of that interests you, please do check it out. It's a really great resource, and I'm very proud to be part of it, because we're doing our best to try and bring the analysis side of competitive 40k to being accessible to everybody. And so far I feel like the guys that I'm working with have been doing a great job of that, and I'm allowed to say that I feel like I'm doing okay with it as well.
Yeah, no, the website is excellent. For just honestly, I'll say for now, both the podcast and the website, just having access to those stats is just excellent. To be able to have a quick look at the meta, see how you're doing. You can even break it down into faction to faction, matchups. It's honestly, the work you do to keep that up to date must be a nightmare. So I massively appreciate it. So please, guys, go check it out.
Yeah, it's absolutely nothing to do with me, but I love support. I love being able to do all the stuff we do to support being able to fund that for the stats guys. Is basically that's what the podcast and the Patreon and all that go towards, is making sure that we can continue to provide resources to the community so that everybody can have access to data to make informed decisions about their lists, about the meta, and to understand why things are bad, why things are good.
But yeah, it's really good. I mean, hopefully GW pay some attention to it themselves, and hopefully things like that are things that they'll have taken into account for their balanced data slate. But we'll find this out tomorrow. Obviously by the time people listen to this, there's a good chance a balanced data slate will be out, and some of the things that we're questioning today will be answered. But obviously it's really interesting that the fact that you brought down what you think Plague Marine should be, and then obviously we can see how that compares to what it is, because the fact that you've seen the stats and obviously you play a wide variety of armies, it'll be a good sort of a good leveler, I suppose, to see how much the balanced data slate may or may not impact the meta and Death Guard standing in it. But at that point, I mean, I'm gonna say goodbye, and obviously it's been great to have you on, Ennis. You know, thank you very much for investing your time and also, you know, taking Death Guard and being such an innovator with the list. I mean, some of the stuff that you've tried, no one else had tried, to my knowledge, and certainly you've given me some food for thought. But I'll let Aiden sign off, and then obviously anything you want to say, you know, we can call it there.
No, all I got is thanks so much for having me, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I hope to be back someday after winning a Super Major with Death Guard. Let's go for that. I can't promise it'll be this edition, but one day, that's the goal, right?
Oh well, we'll get you back if you win a Super Major with Death Guard. Then, like I say, we'll definitely get you back on, and even like I say, I'm sure we can even sort of award you with something sort of Death Guard orientated. I don't know what it would be. We'll think of something.
Well, now I'm gonna have to really have a look at this balanced data slate tomorrow.
Yeah. No, honestly, I'm super excited. If you, like I said, you're always welcome to come on if you want to chat Death Guard stuff again. I'm just happy to see someone obviously picking up. I love the faction. It is like I'm a one-trick pony sort of with Death Guard. So to see someone else come and pick it up and take a completely different innovative style of list, I love it. So again, if you ever fancy even just taking it to an RTT and have some cool experiences, taking off meta list and want to talk about it, you just send me a message, mate. We'll get you back on again. It's been absolute blast talking to you, and I hope you have a much more fun time talking about 40k as a whole after tomorrow.
Oh, it can't get worse, I don't think. So whatever happens, even if all they did was put 5 points on the Wraith Guard, at least that's one less thing they've got. So
yeah, true.
It can't be that bad.
Death to Eldar. There we go. We'll leave it there, guys. But thank you very much, and thanks again, Ennis. See you in the next one, guys.